Okay, I'm going to start this morning by welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Krap, Sawadee Krap. Welcome to all of you guys that are here at the temple and everyone who's joining us online. Welcome to everyone. We're going to start our morning with some meditation, and then afterwards I'm going to move into introducing the course to you, and then we'll talk about all the various aspects of the topics that you're going to be learning over the course of the next 5 days. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I ease into meditation with some chanting, and these chants are on the laminated sheet over there on the table. You're welcome to get the laminated sheet with the chants on them if you like. For those of you guys that are online, the chants are on our website. If you go to buddhadailywisdom.com and you click on free books down towards the bottom there, you'll see the resources where it has the chants there. These chants, they're nothing mystical or magical. It's not rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship or anything like that. This just helps ease the mind into meditation so that you can get more benefit out of the meditation itself. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory because all of his teachings were oral. But today we don't need to chant in order to commit the teachings to memory because we have books and audiobooks, podcasts, videos, things like this. But I still chant in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation. This afternoon, I'm going to be teaching you guys these chants so that you can learn them and then develop your practice if you'd like to learn how to do Pali chanting. If you read the English translations, there's a lot of respect and admiration and gratitude for the Buddha. I suspect that his students probably created these chants either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha doesn't go around teaching people to chant to him and show all this admiration and respect and gratitude. He would have eliminated his ego, so he wouldn't have created these chants as a way to have people honor him and respect him. So his students probably created these either during his life or after his death. So I'll ease into meditation with the chanting, then I'll be guiding you for just a short period of time in meditation, but then it'll just be quiet and we'll just all be meditating together. Those of us here and everybody that's online, we can just be meditating together. And then afterwards, we'll come out with some more chanting as well. And then in terms of your body position, you might just be sitting comfortably on the floor, in a chair, on a sofa, on a bench, or something like this. Or you can even do the lying position, the standing position. And in this course, I'm going to be teaching the walking position too. On Wednesday afternoon, you'll learn walking meditation. So some little pointers on seated meditation is if you're on the floor, you usually like to have your legs lightly crossed. Some people like to have some cushions under their rear, and some people even like to put their legs off the mat because this gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles and allows the circulation to flow. You're not interested in any pain in the body while you're meditating. You like to just kind of shift and adjust your position. The hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. So you could use this if you like, but it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. Some people might decide to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees or their palms up. Some people like to just put their hands resting comfortably in their lap. So wherever your hands and arms are comfortable, you can just place them wherever you like. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect so that you can breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, keeping the mind attentive and alert, with the sternum up and the shoulders back. So again, I'm going to ease into meditation with some chanting, and then afterwards I'll come in with some guidance to help you guys in meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavaṇ Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, so with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose, or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวะโพตังมะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะควะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I welcome all of you guys here at the temple. Welcome to everyone online. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. This is the first day of our 5-day course where I'll be sharing with you the foundational teachings of the Buddha. And of course, you guys are welcome to come and go as you please, and you can make yourself comfortable. For those of you guys that haven't been here before, there's a bathroom in the very last door on the right. You're welcome to help yourself and use the restroom anytime you like. If you go outside the classroom, there's signs that'll take you around to the main temple bathroom. We even have water and some snacks that are showing up from our students that you're welcome to help yourself. They've actually donated these things for our students to be able to enjoy and make yourself comfortable. So feel free to make yourself at home as you go throughout the week or for whatever amount of time that you might decide to be here. When students first start learning with me, I usually spend a few minutes to just share something with you that's going to really help you approach the teachings of the Buddha in a way that's going to be highly beneficial for you. It's important that you don't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs. You don't believe a bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. There aren't rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. Even this chanting that I was just doing, there's no rites or ritual or ceremonies in the teachings of the Buddha. He didn't put together a bunch of beliefs that you need to believe and then something good is going to happen when you die. He didn't teach a bunch of rules or commandments and things like this. What he's doing is he's helping you and guiding you to this enlightened mental state. We're going to be talking about enlightenment and what this is this morning, but just in general, just to get you started with understanding a bit about what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you attain in this life where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these discontent feelings and others are eliminated. You don't even have the slightest displeasure in the mind. The mind's always in a good mood. You'll see your personal and your professional relationships will really blossom. But you can't get to that through belief. The thing that's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state is this lack of wisdom, where the mind doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. This is referred to in some people's teachings as ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. A Buddha doesn't speak in a derogatory way, so this word ignorance isn't really an accurate translation. So this is why I use the word or the phrase unknowing of true reality. It's essentially a lack of wisdom, where the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. For example, in the unenlightened state, the mind just doesn't even understand that its own mind is causing its discontent feelings. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we blame other people for our discontent feelings, for our anger and our sadness and frustration. But you're going to learn tomorrow when I talk about the Four Noble Truths, and you'll be able to independently verify for yourself that your mind is causing these discontent feelings itself. So there's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that is to be believed. Instead, what the Buddha is sharing with you is what's referred to as the natural laws of existence. He's teaching to you the natural laws of the world and explaining to you how the world is. The Buddha didn't explain the way the world should be, that if you learn a bunch of rules and commandments and everybody follows these things, that somehow the world's going to become a more peaceful place. Instead, he's explaining to you the way the world is. He's explaining the natural laws of existence. And when you awaken to these natural laws, meaning you gain wisdom about these natural laws, your mind will function more optimally in the world, because it's a real struggle and it's very difficult to exist in a world that you don't understand. So in the unenlightened state, we will make either wise or unwise decisions, and they will lead to wholesome results or unwholesome results. This is referred to as gama or karma. Some people refer to it as. In the Sanskrit language, it's referred to as karma. In the Pali language, which is the original source teachings of the Buddha, it's called gama. If this translated to just one English word, I would just use that. What it is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. So when you make unwise decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome gama. With the lack of wisdom, the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So it makes unwise decisions that produces unwholesome results. But when you gain wisdom and you awaken to these natural laws, namely the natural law of karma, you can make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results in your life. And one of those wholesome results is the enlightened mental state, where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. And this process of awakening to the natural laws, you need to be able to learn the teachings, investigate them, and examine them. You need to be able to reflect on them, to independently verify and see that they're true. And then you'll need to practice them, meaning integrate them into your life, so that you can now train your mind and actively move the mind to this enlightened mental state. And you've done the same exact thing as it relates to other natural laws. As we were all growing up, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity. So we made unwise decisions about this natural law. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbow, we broke open our knees, we broke our toys. We had all kinds of struggles with this natural law of gravity. But slowly but surely, through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, we started experiencing improved results with this natural law of gravity. Because we gained wisdom of this natural law, we could see the truth for ourselves. And we started making wiser decisions, like tying our shoes a bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we were walking. We started making improved decisions. Like, for example, this particular cup that I have is full of water. And I choose not to put it here in front of me because I know that I'll knock it over, right? We make wiser decisions when we understand a natural law. Nobody told me to do this. Nobody made a rule that I had to put this cup of water behind me. But you make wiser decisions that produce wholesome results when you understand a natural law. So the Buddha is not teaching rules or commandments and trying to guilt, shame, or fear anybody into doing anything. His mind was already peaceful and joyful, and he had gotten to this enlightened mental state through understanding the natural laws of existence. Because these natural laws affect you, whether you're aware of them or not. not. Just like the natural law of gravity affected all of us, whether we were aware of it or not, when we were 1 year old, 3 years old, 5 years old, it was still affecting us, even though we had no idea what the natural law of gravity was. But as we gained wisdom, now we're at the point where we can ride a bicycle or a motorbike, we can climb ladders, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we understand this natural law of gravity. So now we make wise decisions related to it, and we don't struggle and have difficulties with it any longer. So when you're experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, the mind is struggling. It's having difficulties. There's certain things that the mind just doesn't understand. So learning the teachings of the Buddha, you don't believe anything that I say. You don't believe anything that I write in books. You don't believe anything. Instead, you learn it, you reflect on it, independently verified, and you practice it. And this is what's going to lead to acquiring wisdom, which will awaken the mind more and more to this enlightened mental state. Essentially, what the Buddha did is he discovered these individual pollutions that are in the mind, and he provided the tools and the techniques of how to eliminate those from the mind. So when you eliminate these certain conditions that are in the mind, then you can get to the point where, having eradicated these pollutions of mind, the mind can perform more optimally. And this is why not only do you not experience any discontent feelings, and the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, but the mind will be focused and concentrated, having clarity of mind and deep memory. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships will really blossom. There won't be bitterness and hostility and harshness in your relationships any longer. So this is just a little bit of a way to understand how to approach the teachings of the Buddha, is do it through acquiring wisdom. So as I'm sharing teachings with you this week, if there's anything that I share that you don't understand, or it conflicts with something that you currently feel that you know, or maybe you've been learning other places and what I'm sharing with you about meditation or any other teachings of the Buddha is different than what you currently know, this is actually a really good thing. If you're sitting in a classroom and everything that I share with you is exactly what you already know, you're in the wrong place. So if you're learning from a teacher that is sharing things with you that is opposite of what you know, or it doesn't match to what you currently know, that's an opportunity to ask questions and gain clarification, and ask questions of why somebody teaches one thing versus another. Because if you currently experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, then you know your mind's currently unenlightened. So there's certain wisdom that you're lacking. So if somebody's sharing something with you that's different than what you currently know, this is an opportunity to learn and gain clarity and ask questions. And that's what you would like to do when you're in a classroom with a teacher, is ask questions rather than just kind of ignore what's being shared or rejecting what's being shared. Instead, ask questions about how to independently verify this, because everything I share with you is independently verifiable. Everything that I share, it's either in the Pali Canon, essentially it's in the Pali Canon, which is the original source teachings of the Buddha, and I never believed the Pali Canon. The second thing I did is I learned it and practiced it for myself and saw the results that I was experiencing because of it. Then I started sharing it with students, and students see the results as well. And then the fourth thing is that Thai people occasionally, as they spend time with me and they learn what it is that I'm sharing, they'll ask me questions about, what I share for meditation or the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path or things like this. And they say, hey, I was just at this temple the last 2 weeks, and this monk there, everybody knows that they're enlightened, and there's plenty of people there studying with them. And you're teaching the exact same thing that they're teaching, but they're teaching in Thai and you're teaching in English. So over time, Thai people have discovered that what I'm sharing is the original teachings of the Buddha. And this is one of the reasons why they invite me to come teach at the temples, is because they understand that what I'm sharing is the original teachings of the Buddha, and it will guide you to enlightenment if you decide to investigate and examine the teachings, reflect on them to independently verify them, and then practice them, not believing the teachings. So because you're learning now, you're reflecting now, and you're practicing now, you see the results now in this life. So that's why I share the teachings of the Buddha. It's not a bunch of beliefs of things that you believe and then you hope something good happens when you die. Whether it's the natural law of karma, whether it's the cycle of rebirth, whether it's any other aspect of the teachings of the Buddha, there's ways to independently verify this. Your mind might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you interact with a teacher that knows how to do that, you can gain the wisdom of how to independently verify these teachings. So this natural law of karma, it's cause and effect, or action and result. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not about who's at fault or who's to blame. There's not some being that is overseeing this. There's nobody turning this on or turning this off. Just like the natural law of gravity, there's nobody overseeing this. There's nobody turning it on or turning it off, and it affects all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. So if you'd like to learn these teachings and get to this enlightened mental state, that's what I'm here for you to do, so that you can learn and practice and understand the teachings of the Buddha, to be able to train your mind and experience the peace and the joy of the enlightened mental state. And as we go in our class, you'll be able to ask questions, whether you're here at the temple or you're online. You'll all be able to ask questions as we go. This first part that I'm going to share with you guys is just kind of a little bit of an introduction to the course and helping you understand what it is that you're going to be learning. And then we're going to moving into various topics of discussion to be able to help you to learn the teachings of the Buddha. So I'm going to switch over to some visual aids here so our people online can see. So this course, it's titled Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. It's a 30-hour course, essentially from 9 a.m. in the morning until 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And we take about an hour and a half lunch break each day. We start our morning with meditation, like you saw. We start each morning with meditation, and in the afternoon we do meditation together too. So you'll see I kind of have it separated, where in the morning I share teachings with you that are going to help you to understand these natural laws. And then in the afternoons, we tend to focus on meditation training and things like this. And a combination of this is what's going to help you to gradually build up your foundation in the path to enlightenment. This is my contact information. Not that you guys necessarily need that now. If you're coming to class, great. If you're not going to be here, that's fine too. This is just impermanence. You can choose for yourself. But oftentimes after the course, students need help. So I'll always ensure that you have access to contact information to be able to contact me. And all this information is on our website, so you can get access to this if you like. In terms of the way the course is structured is, as I mentioned, in the morning we do chanting and meditation, and then around 9:30 I start sharing teachings, or the way I think about it is a discussion. It's more of an interactive discussion. Some people refer to this as a Dhamma talk. Then we take lunch generally around 12 o'clock, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. It just depends on what's going on in the class, but just know that this is kind of flexible. But that's generally when we will take lunch. And then we will generally come back around 1:30. Each time we go to lunch, I will let you know what time I'm going to restart, whether it's 1:30 or 1:45 or 1 o'clock. I will let you know based on the time that we're parting, but it's generally around 1:30. And there I'm going to be teaching about meditation typically. And then we finish typically around 3 o'clock. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. It just depends on what's going on in the class. And then the last day, on Friday, I invite you guys to a field trip to some local temples here, where I take you out to a forest temple and a temple that's up on a mountain, and I walk you around and I teach you the teachings of the Buddha through the artwork, the architecture, the symbolism at the temples. Because if you spend 4 days in the classroom like this learning, then when we go off to this tour, you can learn a lot more through understanding the symbolism, architecture, and artwork of a temple. It kind of comes to life. If you just walk through a temple and you don't know these things, it's like, oh, okay, wow, that's beautiful. Wow, that's pretty. Oh, that's interesting. But if you understand the symbolism, the artwork, and the architecture, the temple can kind of speak to you, because these temples oftentimes were built 500 to 1,000 years ago, and the artists and the craftspeople who are working on them, they embedded the teachings of the Buddha into the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism. And you can understand that and glean insight if you know the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism. You can walk around knowing the teachings of the Buddha, and it can refresh your memory about what he actually taught and help you on your journey to enlightenment. So I'll explain this tour to you a bit later when we get to kind of Thursday afternoon. We'll kind of talk about it. Anybody is welcome to come. You'll see that some people will come that aren't even here at the course, and you'll see people coming and going throughout the course. I have an open door policy that people can come and go. So sometimes students come just for meditation and they leave. Sometimes they come for an hour talk here or there and they leave. Sometimes students are here for the entire course. You'll see people kind of coming and going. And same thing with the tour. People will come that aren't even part of the course, that they'll just come just for the tour. So this is kind of our general outline for the structure and schedule of the program. Everything that I'm teaching in this particular course is based on this book. it's part of the Words of the Buddha, the Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden Book series. You can actually download this for free if you like from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon. If your country has access to Amazon, you can order it from there. Having access to this book is really helpful because I'm going to be teaching all these chapters, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. I'm going to be teaching these as part of this course. This makes up the foundation of the teachings of the Buddha. And as I mentioned, it's available for free on our website. You can also acquire it through Amazon or here at the temple and things like that. This is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is volume 1 of a 13-book series. Then in terms of what you're going to be learning in the course is this morning I'm going to start off with the life story of Gotama Buddha. I'm going to be sharing with you who this gentleman is or was so that you can understand a bit about his life story. If you're going to learn his teachings, it'd be nice to know a bit about his life story. So I'm going to share that with you. Then after we take our break, I'll be sharing with you enlightenment. What is enlightenment? So that you'll understand what it is, and then you'll be able to more readily navigate your way to it. And as you get to enlightenment, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened. Then tomorrow, I'm going to be sharing with you what's called the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha in order to help you get on the path to enlightenment. This is where he describes the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So in 4 simple statements, you'll be able to understand what is the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that, the elimination, and the path forward. Because how could you ever eliminate your discontent feelings if you didn't understand what was causing them? So I'll teach this to you in a way that you can independently verify it for yourself and see what's causing these discontent feelings. Then we're also going to be learning the Eightfold Path. This is the path for all humans to enlightenment. It's a core central teaching that the Buddha taught where all the other teachings plug into it. So I'm going to be using the words of the Buddha to walk you through step by step and teaching you about what the Eightfold Path is. Essentially, it's like 8 individual dials that if you dial these 8 individual dials into your life closer and closer, this is what's going to help your mind perform more and more optimally. It's kind of like a speaker system that if you were trying to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers, you would dial these 8 dials in very closely and you get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. And your mind is exactly the same way. So I'm going to walk you through using the original words of the Buddha to help you understand this core central teaching. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be learning transforming the 3 poisons, craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a kind of a higher level description of what's plaguing the unenlightened mind. So you kind of broaden your understanding and deepen your understanding of what's really causing issues in the unenlightened mind. So I'm going to be explaining the problems, the symptoms, and the solutions of how to fix this and uproot these out of the mind. Then also on Wednesday, I'll be sharing with you the 5 precepts. If you've learned that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach this. This is not his teachings. He didn't describe the 5 precepts in this way. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who might be sharing it in that way. I'm going to be sharing with you the original words of the Buddha around the 5 precepts, and then I'm going to show you how to apply it to your life, because a Buddha speaks very clear, very concise, and very precise. When you hear no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, this sounds like a bunch of rules. It sounds like black and white. And a Buddha doesn't actually teach that way. A Buddha shares much more illuminating language that's going to help you to understand this natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. So when you study with the original words of the Buddha, you'll be able to be more informed about your practice and make your way to enlightenment more readily. So I'm going to be sharing that with you on Wednesday morning. Then on Thursday, we'll be studying what is karma and how does it affect me. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. But on Thursday morning, we're going to go in and talk about the natural law itself. But even when we're talking about the Eightfold Path and the 5 precepts and things like this, the Buddha is exposing to you the natural law of karma. But we're going to be going in and talking about that specifically on Thursday morning. Then we're going to be describing what is merit and helping you understand how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment, because it's wonderful learning in a class like this and having a 5-day course, but you're going to need help after this. You're going to need continuous guidance on the path. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment in just 5 days. Then throughout the course, I've integrated this meditation training where in the afternoons, we're going to be focused on chanting and meditation. We're going to be focusing primarily on breathing mindfulness meditation in the positions of seated, lying, standing, and walking, because this is the primary form of training that you use in terms of meditation. But you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. You couldn't just sit in meditation and actually get to enlightenment. You need other teachings and other tools and other techniques. Because if you were meditating, say for 5, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, not that you would do it for that long necessarily, but let's just say you were, and you went outside and you were aggressive and hostile and bitter and harsh with people, your mind's not experiencing enlightenment at that point. So while meditation is important and it's a crucial aspect of your training on the path, there's other things that you need besides meditation. But we're going to focus on meditation in the mornings by doing that, and in the afternoon by doing meditation. But then I'm going to be teaching meditation to you in the afternoons so you can learn about it and integrate it more and more into your life. And then at the very end of the course, I'm going to be teaching you how to integrate these teachings into your life. Because sometimes students go away to retreats and places like this to learn. And then when they go out into the world, they really struggle integrating the teachings into their life. Because you can have this great experience in a retreat, but then it's like, whoa, boom, you're back into the real world. So what I do is that's why I have this course where it's from 9 to 3. And then the things that I taught you, go out into the world and practice it so that you can integrate it into your life. But I'm going to teach you specifically about integrating these teachings into your life when we get to that towards the end of the course. So this is the makeup of the course itself and what you'll learn. Do you guys have any questions here? Any questions online about the course itself? Shaking your head, no? 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 Okay. Let me see online if we have any questions. Those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online either. All right, so let's move into the first topic of discussion, which is chapter 19 of that first book. The chapter is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death, because these are the things that motivated Siddhartha Gotama to go on this journey to enlightenment. I'm going to share with you his life story to help you guys understand a bit about his life. And I've organized this into his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, the teachings that he shares, and then what motivated him in terms of what's called the 4 observations: sickness, aging, and death, and then an aesthetic. So Siddhartha Gotama was born in what we refer to as Nepal. But of course, that line of Nepal didn't exist 2,500 years ago. He was born in 563 BCE, and he was born into a royal family. His mom was a queen and his dad was a king. And the way that things worked during those time frame is that when the woman was pregnant and she was about to deliver the baby, they would take her back to her homeland. So because she lived with the king, when she was getting ready to deliver, they organized a caravan to take her back to her homeland. And on her way back home, she goes into labor. And they have to stop the caravan, and she gets out and goes over to a tree, and she holds on to the branch of a tree, and she's trying to deliver the baby standing up, and she's having difficulties getting the baby out. So the baby ends up breaking through the side of her stomach, and because of this, she ends up dying 7 days later. Nowadays, we would have just did a C-section and she would have been just fine. But because the technology didn't exist 2,500 years ago, she ends up dying. And a female dying during childbirth wasn't necessarily uncommon 2,500 years ago. So they had protocols in place to take care of this. What they would do is your siblings would adopt your children as their own children. So she had an older sister, and her older sister adopted Siddhartha Gotama as her own child. So his aunt was his stepmother, and he grows up as part of this royal family. So 7 days after his birth, his mom ended up dying. It's said at the time of his birth that when he comes out, he instantly walks 7 steps. Lotus flowers are blossoming under his feet, and that he spoke and he said, "This will be my last birth." But I don't suspect that this is actually true. I think this is an embellishment of the story. Sometimes when somebody does something so amazing like what the Buddha did, as time goes on and they're writing the stories down of what happened, sometimes people embellish the stories to make them look even better than they already are. We don't need to embellish the story of Siddhartha Gotama. His life was amazing and he did some amazing things. But I suspect that this part of the story is actually untrue, because if it was true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. The next part of the story is that his father, being the king, was interested in understanding what his son was going to become. So he summons advisors to come talk to him, kind of like fortune tellers, to come explain to him what his son is going to become. He has 108 people come and advise him what his son's going to do during his life. And 107 of these advisors share with the king that your son is going to be a great monarch or great ruler. He's going to expand your territory far and wide. And of course, his father's like, yeah, that's my boy. All right. Yeah, that's what I want. Right. And then there's like this one advisor who comes in and says, sir, I'm so sorry. I overheard the other advisors, and they're 100% correct that your son is going to be a great leader, but not in the way that you think. He's going to be a great spiritual leader. His father didn't like this. So his father ends up sequestering him into the palace, keeps him locked away in the palace for his entire life, all the way up until the age of 29. So again, if that part of the story was true, where his lotus flowers were blossoming and so forth, you wouldn't need advisors to come tell you what your son's going to become, because you would know this is a pretty special child. So for 29 years, he stays locked away in the palace. His father tries to woo him into the ways of being a monarch. His father wasn't interested in him going out into the palace and understanding worldly life and being interested in being a spiritual leader. So he lavishes him with all kinds of gifts and worldly things that would be able to keep him hooked into being a monarch. He gave him wonderful food and entertainment and fabrics and jewels and riches and beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. Everything you can imagine that a rich king could do for their son, he did those things for his son. But at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama realized he was about to become the king. Because during this lifetime, you would become the king at the age of 30. You wouldn't become the king when your dad died, because at the age of 30, you would become the king, your dad would retire, and then your dad would be right there to help you become a better and better king, kind of guiding you along. So at the age of 29, realizing he was about to become the king and he had never even been outside the palace, how could he rule over people in a kingdom that he's never even seen? So against his father's wishes and without his father even knowing, he goes outside the palace and he takes with him his royal attendant, kind of like a chief of staff. And he goes out into the kingdom and he makes what's called the 4 observations. And Siddhartha Gautama sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and then he sees a roaming ascetic, somebody who's kind of given up worldly life in order to try to understand life better. And when he sees this sickly person, he's confused because he sees all this disgruntledness and this anger and frustration around this person. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, oh, that guy's sick and, can't work, and his family isn't going to be able to have food and clothing and the things that they need. This is all new to Siddhartha Gautama. He doesn't understand this life because he's got everything he needs in the royal palace. Then he sees the second thing, an aging person, an older and decrepit person, struggling with aches and pains in the body and disgruntled and angry. And of course, he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there, right? Because he's living this life with this great, amazing things going on in the palace, and he didn't understand this disgruntledness. And then he sees a dead corpse, and he needs to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? Because he sees all these people in misery and grieving that this person has died. And he has to explain to him, this is what happens to you at the end of this life. And then he sees a roaming ascetic, what we would probably refer to as an ordained practitioner. He sees somebody meditating and training their mind, and he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? What's that person doing? And he's like, oh, that person's trying to understand all of this stuff that's going on and why these things are happening. And Siddhartha Gautama decides that's what he would like to do. That the way he looked at it is that the kingdom was full of misery and despair. And he wasn't interested in ruling over misery and despair. He was interested in helping the people to escape this and get out of it. So he decides in that moment that he's going to leave from the royal palace and go on this journey to try to understand life. So he goes back to the royal palace, and at this time he has a wife and he has a young infant son. And they're sleeping because it's nighttime. And he looks in on them and he doesn't wake them up and tell them that he's leaving, because he feels like he would be kind of pulled and he wouldn't be able to leave, that he would be struggling with leaving. So he didn't even wake them up or say goodbye or anything like this. He just leaves and he goes on this journey, and he takes with him his favorite horse and he takes with him his royal attendant. And as they leave, he gets to a point where he lets his royal attendant go. He lets his horse go. He tells, his royal attendant, hey, you've been a great person. I don't need you anymore. I'm going to go off on my own. And he does what we now understand is cutting off his hair. That he has this long flowing hair at the time of his life, because during this time frame, the way that people would know that you're part of the royal family is you would grow this really long flowing hair, because it would only be members of the royal family that would be able to keep up with this. Because those of us that are out in the fields and laboring and doing labor work, we wouldn't be able to have this long, beautiful flowing hair, because it would get all tangled and knotted up, and we don't have time to take care of it in the way that the royal family would. The royal family could sit around with servants, having people comb their hair, shampoo their hair, detangling their hair. So when you would go out into the kingdom, if you had this long, beautiful flowing hair, they would know you're a member of the royal family. Today, we just take pictures, and we put pictures of the king and the queen all over the kingdom, and people know who the king and the queen are, but they didn't have that back then. So they used this long flowing hair to distinguish who is a part of the royal family. So by cutting off his hair, it's like, I'm never going back, because nobody would ever believe that he was the king. After having grown this hair for 29 years and cut it off, no one would ever believe that he's the king. And then we know that it accomplishes other things for you too, which you'll understand tomorrow when we talk about the universal truth of non-self. But nonetheless, he ends up starting to shed things and start letting things go. Early on in his training, in his journey to enlightenment, he takes up training with two different teachers. First, one teacher, he starts training with this person for about a year. And after that time frame, this teacher distinguishes him as a master of his teachings. He says, you've mastered my teachings. You can now share my teachings with others. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was back in the palace. And he knows that he hadn't gotten to enlightenment. So he ends up leaving from this teacher and going to study with another teacher. And the same thing is true, that this teacher started teaching him different things and got to about 1 year mark. And he said, you've mastered my teachings. You can now share them with other people. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind wasn't any more enlightened than it was when he was back in the palace. And the reason why is because they were teaching him things to disparage the human body. They were teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, lay on beds of nails, pierce your body with metal implements, starve yourself. The thought was that if you could cause physical pain to the body, your mind could overcome that, and then you would get to enlightenment. And Siddhartha Gotama realized that this wasn't true, that it didn't work. So he ends up leaving from these teachers after about 2 years, and he goes off in the forest by himself. But this is all that he knows, is what he learned from these two teachers. So he continues to practice these same things, taking it all the way to the point where he's only eating 1 grain of rice per day. If you've ever seen a statue or artwork of the Buddha where his ribs are protruding, his facial bones are protruding and things like this, this is during that period of time where he was emaciated. He was like on death's doorstep because he was eating just 1 grain of rice per day. He took it all the way to the extreme. And then he was meditating one day on the edge of the forest, and there was a mother and her young daughter that walked by, and they saw him, and they realized that he was about to die because he was so emaciated and his bones were protruding and things like this. And they begged and pleaded with him to eat some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice, and he starts to eat. And he realizes in this moment something very profound that really propelled his practice from that point forward. He realizes what we refer to as the middle way. That when he was in the palace, he was living this life of sensual pleasures, and he had everything and anything you could ever want. But then when he left, he took it to the extreme of eating just 1 grain of rice per day. He was living on opposite sides of the spectrum. So he started learning this middle way and discovering this middle way With food, it was to eat in moderation. Instead of gorging and eating a massive amount of food or eating just 1 grain of rice per day, that you needed to eat in moderation. And now he starts training his mind in this way with the middle way. And gradually, slowly but surely, he trains his mind over the next 4 years. So a total of 6, he ends up ultimately getting to enlightenment. So he got to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. This is the first criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. But then, as he got to enlightenment, he knew that he was enlightened because his mind was peaceful and joyful. He knew what it felt like to experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, loneliness, boredom, stress, anxiety, things like this. And he was no longer experiencing those anymore. So he knows that he had gotten to enlightenment, but his teachings were radically different than anything anybody else was sharing at the time, because all these people were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. So he ends up spending about 7 weeks at this particular tree, contemplating whether or not he should actually share his teachings with others. And we tend to attribute this tree to the location where he attained enlightenment, but in reality, he attained enlightenment over that 6-year period. It wasn't just one location where he instantly got to enlightenment. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can't just instantly snap your fingers and get to enlightenment. So he spends 7 weeks at this tree contemplating whether he should actually share his teachings. Well, ultimately, we know the story that he did share his teachings. So he ends up deciding that he's going to share his teachings, and he comes back to the area where he was originally studying with those 2 teachers, and he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. When they see him coming, they start laughing at him, joking him, mocking him. But by this point, when your mind's enlightened, those things don't affect you. The reason why they were joking him and laughing at him and mocking him is because they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment, because they saw he had meat on his bones. Because to them, in order to get to enlightenment and be on the path to enlightenment, you needed to be starving yourself and your body would be emaciated. So when they saw that he looked bright and radiant and he had meat on his bones and he looked healthy, they started laughing and joking and mocking him, thinking that he had given up. So in reality, he had already attained enlightenment. So he comes over and he sits down where these people are and he touches the earth. And he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. Because the Buddha doesn't perform a bunch of miracles to try to convince people who they are. But initially, they will perform one miracle with kind of instrumental group of people that are going to help them get going in sharing their teachings. So he touches the earth, and when he touches the earth, all these animals come. So there's like these deer and lizards and snakes and birds and squirrels and rabbits and all these different animals come to where he's at. And these 5 people, his 4 previous classmates and 1 teacher, is like, okay, you got our attention. And they sit down and he shares with them what's called the 4 Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching that you would need in order to get on the path to enlightenment. So in 4 simple statements, he explains the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And because his teachings are independently verifiable, the students, those 5 students, could see that yes, he has attained enlightenment because he's figured it out, and we can independently verify it. So when I share with you tomorrow the 4 Noble Truths, you'll be able to see the truth for yourself of exactly what's causing these discontent feelings, because then you can actually eliminate them from the mind. But if you didn't understand what was causing it, you wouldn't be able to eliminate it. So from that point forward, at the age of 35, where he gets to enlightenment and he starts teaching, he continues to teach throughout the rest of his life for 80 years, sharing his teachings with countless people. And countless people get to enlightenment during his lifetime. This is the second criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. And then by the time he dies at the age of 80, his teachings have been preserved, that in the minds and in the hearts of people, they preserve his teachings, that after he dies, they write down his teachings. During his lifetime, everything was oral. This is why they chanted during his lifetime, is to commit the teachings to memory. But shortly after his life, they wrote down the teachings. Because once you get to enlightenment, you'll never forget the wisdom that it took for you to get to enlightenment. Your mind will be deeply concentrated and focused. You'll have deep memory. You won't forget those teachings. So 500 of these countless enlightened beings came together shortly after his death and documented the teachings. This is the third criteria of what makes a Buddha, is that they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So getting to enlightenment by yourself without the help of any teachers or any guides, dedicating the rest of your life to sharing your independently discovered teachings and countless people getting to enlightenment, and then preserving your teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after your death. That's what a Buddha is. A Buddha is very rare in the world. The last one that the world currently is aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. You can get to enlightenment, but at that point, you won't be an actual Buddha because you won't meet these three criteria. And there's other criteria too of what makes a Buddha that I'm going to share with you a little bit later. So this sickness, aging, and death was the motivators that motivated Siddhartha Gotama to go on this journey and ultimately get to enlightenment where he is actually a Buddha. What he discovers is the reason why people are so disgruntled when they're sick is that they're craving permanent health. They want to be permanently healthy. And when you get what you want, you're happy, you're excited, you're elated. But then when you experience impermanence or you experience change, your mind doesn't like that change. It's craving permanence. If the mind's craving and longing and yearning and wanting permanent health, when you experience this impermanence where you've now become unhealthy, the mind gets frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. And the same thing is true with aging. If you're craving permanent youthfulness, not realizing that this body is impermanent, then you will struggle and have difficulties as you age. And the same thing with death is that if you crave for somebody to be permanently alive, or you crave yourself to be permanently in existence, then when there's death, you will struggle with that. So the motivators that motivated him to move to this journey to get to enlightenment was seeing this sickness, aging, and death and the disgruntledness that people experienced. And he realized that it's within your own mind that's causing these feelings. And we're going to talk about this more when we describe the Four Noble Truths tomorrow. So any questions on the life story of Gotama Buddha? One moment, sir. I just wanted to share that if you could use this microphones here in the bowl, and you guys can keep those with you, because then the people online will be able to hear you. There's a little gray button on the front, and then when the lights come on, you just hold it up to your chin. We'll be able to hear you here, and they'll be able to hear you online. It just takes a second to engage. Can you hear me now? Nope. I can hear you, but not through the mic.
Low battery. Oh,
there you go. There you go. Oh, it cut out. You can just set it on the floor there, then we'll know which one it is. Just press it and give it like a second to engage. When you see the lights come on, you'll know that it's on.
How about now?
There
okay.
You go.
I thought I had heard or read that the Buddha sat under a tree for 2 years, and he was, fed up with his current lifestyle and said, I'm just going to sit under this tree, the Bodhi tree, for 2 years and until I become enlightened. And that's what happened.
Yeah, this is the unfortunate thing about the teachings of the Buddha, but it's just like everything else, that there's impermanence, is that oftentimes people aren't studying with the original source teachings of the Buddha, so therefore you hear all these different stories and all these misunderstandings about the teachings. But if you go back to the original source text, which is the largest, most complete collection that we have of the teachings of the Buddha, it documents his life story. And what I just shared with you is a summarized version of that. And anything else that somebody says that isn't in the Pali Canon is just hearsay, because that's the only documented proof that we have of what went on and what transpired during his lifetime. So you'll hear different stories about the life story of the Buddha, and people will say lots of different things. And this is all because of what we call impermanence, constant change, is that not everybody understands the exact same thing about the life of the Buddha or his teachings. So you'll hear varying degrees of various stories, but what I share with you is based on the original teachings of the Buddha. And then I encourage you not to believe those things, but if you would like to go back and look yourself, you can go back and look, and I can even share the references with you so that you can go back and see the original source text.
And this teacher said the exact same thing, that this was the real story and other stories. I don't want to debate you. It makes me worried that I'm not, it's nothing personal, that maybe something is false that I'm hearing, because two people are saying this is the real story, that this is the real McCoy, that other person is wrong.
Well,
it makes it confusing for a student.
Yeah, I didn't say that the other person is wrong. I wouldn't say that. But what I do is I invite you to investigate and examine for yourself so you'll know the truth. So if if you're going to be here tomorrow, I'll bring the book with me that you can see the original Pali Canon, and you can see the life story of the Buddha, and you can read it for yourself, and then you'll know what is the truth. But if you haven't seen that yet, which obviously it sounds like you haven't, then you're not going to know the truth. But what I'm sharing with you is based on the original Pali Canon, and I'm willing to share that with you so that you can see it for yourself. What you're experiencing is what's called impermanence. Everything around you is impermanent. But if you crave permanence, this is where you'll be frustrated. You'll be agitated and annoyed. Everything around you is impermanent. So you're not going to ever find a situation where everyone in the world is going to explain the exact same thing. But if some teacher can help you to see the original source teachings, that's where you can see the truth for yourself. So in all actuality, the life story of the Buddha at this point in time doesn't actually matter, because what happened in the past is in the past. We have his teachings, and if you can learn those and independently verify those, that's what's important. But if you are interested in seeing the original source teachings about his life story, I'll bring those in for you so you can see it. Would you like me to bring that tomorrow? Yeah, I'll bring that in for you. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Now just a small question. I heard that the teachings of the Buddha were written down 500 years after his death. Is it right? And the 500 people who met tried to remember it because they were arahants. All they remember it, and 500 years later were written down. Was it not true?
Yeah, this is more impermanence, right? You'll hear different things. Based on what you see in the Pali Canon, there were what's called the first Buddhist council, the second Buddhist council. There was these multiple councils. And shortly after the death of the Buddha, about 3 to 6 months after the death of the Buddha, was the first Buddhist council, where 500 enlightened beings came together. And one of those was Ananda, who was one of his closest students. And he's the one who's credited for having remembered the teachings the best and most accurately. So Ananda was with the Buddha from basically the very first time when the Buddha first started teaching, all the way through his entire teaching career for 45 years. And they started documenting the teachings right after the death of the Buddha, because by the time you get to enlightenment, your wisdom is very deep and very profound. You'll never forget that wisdom. So they started documenting the teachings shortly after the death of the Buddha. But you'll hear different datings of this. You'll hear people, they'll say 200 years, 300 years, 500 years. Again, this is just impermanence, that you're going to hear different things from different people. The fact is that we have his teachings. They're in books. They're accessible to you. You can learn them, reflect on them, and verify them and practice them and see the truth for yourself. But based on everything that you'll see in the Pali Canon, this happened at the first Buddhist council. There's even a location within India. It's a specific cave where that you can actually go and visit, where they actually met for the very first time. But you'll hear different people that will say different things, because the vast majority of the world doesn't actually study with the original source teachings of the Buddha. There's about 500 million people who consider themselves Buddhist in the world, but there's a very small percentage of that actually study with the original teachings of the Buddha. Even here in Thailand, it's very rare to find a community of people that are studying with the original teachings. I've visited over 200 temples in my lifetime, and I was only ever at one temple that shared the original source teachings of the Buddha. That's less than 1% of the temples that I've ever visited that share the original teachings of the Buddha, because they're in 45 large volumes of books that are about this thick, and the average person isn't able to afford to print those out. It would cost about 3 months of a Thai person's salary in order to print out these books and have them accessible. You probably don't own any book collection worth 3 months of your salary. There's very few people in the world that have that kind of ability to purchase a book collection of that magnitude. So the average Thai person doesn't have access to the original source teachings. The average temple, even here in Thailand, they don't purchase the complete collection of the original teachings of the Buddha. So if you're not studying with the original true teachings, you're not going to understand the things that are being shared with you from the original teachings of the Buddha. So if you have been learning and exposed to things in other places, what I'm sharing with you is going to potentially be very different. But then that's where I invite you to look at the original source teachings. And then I've consolidated it into 13 books here, and then I give it away to people for free, that you can download it, you can take it and go print it, you can get printed versions by just reimbursing us for a printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. And this way you'll know the truth for yourself. And then you don't believe any of these things that are being shared with you, but you can see it for yourself and learn, reflect, and practice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir. It's not on yet. If you press the button, the light will come on. I tested them all before.
Okay.
Yeah, just you have to wait a second or two.
Gee. Okay, so I don't know if this is a question, but one thing struck me as quite peculiar. This was the first time that I had heard that Buddha had a wife and child, and that he left them to go up on his journey. So I guess the first question I have is, after his enlightenment and his journey has completed, did he ever go back to them? Because nobody has ever even spoken of their existence.
Sure. So after he gets to enlightenment, he ends up coming back to that area where his kingdom was, and his son, his wife, his stepmother, his cousins, and people like this started ordaining with him, and they started learning with him, and they all get to enlightenment. His son, his wife, his stepmother, these different people were getting to enlightenment. So he did end up spending time with them, but not in the palace as like a domestic person. Instead, he continued to live this life of homelessness, where he just traveled from house to house, village to village, staying with his students and living off of the generosity of his students, where they would share food and water and clothing and shelter and medical care with him. But he did have a wife and a young infant child when he left. And going on for 6 years, he was able to discover what it took to be able to get to enlightenment. And then he was able to come back and help them and share that with them so that they could experience that same mental state.
That's very interesting to hear. And it's also very interesting to observe that usually in monasteries, when people become a monk, one of the first things they say never to do is to get married or have children. But that was the first thing he did. So I find that interesting.
This is one of the misunderstandings that people have about the path to enlightenment. They think if you're married or you have a child that you can't actually get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. What it is you need to train your mind to eliminate the attachment to these people, or the craving and longing, yearning and holding on to them, wanting them to be permanent. So you can have relationships and be enlightened, right? The Buddha had plenty of relationships in his life. You would have to have relationships as a teacher, but you need to learn how to not be attached to your students. You need to learn how to not be attached to your husband or wife or your children. And that's what the training is going to help you. That's what the path to enlightenment is guiding you. So for example, you can have a cell phone and get to enlightenment. The cell phone's not the problem. The person in your life is not the problem. It's your mind longing and yearning. So when you purify your mind, that's what will help you get to enlightenment. So all these possessions and relationships, you'll have those as part of your basic needs in life, but you can train your mind to not be attached to it and hold on to it tightly.
Thank you for that. And then one thing that you said prompted one question. You said that you had visited many temples, like 200 or something like that, but only one struck you as very authentic. Which one?
So there's a temple down in Bangkok, in Krung Thep, which is called Wat Na Pat Pong. In this particular temple, they have a ordained practitioner there, a Prajan Krukrit, who shares the original words of the Buddha in Thai, and he shares all the books and resources and things like this, and he will teach. So if you understand really deep level, detailed Thai that in Buddhism, you can learn directly with him in Thai. In my opinion, if you speak native English, it's better to learn in English because the community of people you have access to help you is much wider. But this is a temple that shares the original teachings of the Buddha to the point that they don't even have a statue of the Buddha at their temple. It's just basically like a little wooden shack in a forest, but you'll sometimes see 20, 30, 50,000 people there sitting all over the ground. It's just this one little shack that is smaller than this particular classroom that I'm teaching in right now. He shares the original teachings of the Buddha, and you can tell from that community that the people are very loving and very kind and very warm and very gentle. So you can see that they're practicing the teachings very closely. So this is down in Bangkok, about an hour and a half outside the kind of main city center. It's called Wat Na Pat Pong. Yeah, if you go to watnap.com, WATNAPP.com, that's where you'll be able to connect into it. So if you read Thai and you can speak Thai really detailed level, you'll be able to read their website and find the location and all that kind of stuff. They actually have a location here in Chiang Mai, and they even have one in Isan as well. And they even have one, I think, in Switzerland and Germany. They're kind of spreading out here and there. But this is the real focal point of an individual who's sharing the original teachings in Thai. If you're interested in learning them in English, you've got here to be able to learn them in English. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online here. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm not seeing any questions online. I see there's plenty of people online, but I just don't see any questions. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to end our class here with this particular topic by sharing with you that nobody said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough, right? Learning and practicing Gotama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but it'll ensure that life is not tough, right? Because by being in the unenlightened state, you'll struggle. You'll have difficulties. You'll have anger. You'll be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful to people. You'll be hostile and aggressive and bitter to people. And as you put that out, that's what's going to come back to you in your relationships. But when you transform your mind and you train your mind and you're being loving and kind, you're being polite and kind and friendly, respectful to everybody around you, you will see that this is what will come back to you. So life is really tough in the unenlightened state, but it's not supposed to be, right? So nobody ever said life would be easy, but nobody ever said life would be tough. It's dedication, determination, and diligence that's going to propel you and catapult you on the path to enlightenment. You need to be dedicated to learning and practicing, but not believing. You are your own independent practitioner. A teacher is essentially like a tour guide. I'm pointing out to you the things that you need to learn and helping you in your journey, but you're the one that's doing all the work. A teacher isn't here to convince you of anything. They're not here to force you or control you to do anything. It's your journey to enlightenment, and I'm just a tour guide pointing out for you. And then you need to strive in order to learn and grow and develop on that path. And having done so, you'll eradicate all the struggles and difficulties that you've been experiencing throughout your life, because it's really difficult to exist in a world that you don't understand. If you don't understand the natural laws of existence, you will struggle and you'll have difficulties in the world. And part of that is those discontent feelings that the mind experiences. So what I'm going to be doing after our break is I'm going to share with you what enlightenment is so that you can understand this mental state and what you experience as part of this mental state. So right now it's 10:30. So let's take a 20-minute break where we'll come back at 10:50. That'll give you guys plenty of time to go get a snack, use the bathroom, talk with each other, do whatever you need to do, stretch your legs. So those of you guys online, we're going to be starting here at 10:50. So whatever time that is in your time zone, you can see that we'll be live streaming, and we have Zoom up in about 20 minutes from now for this next class about what is enlightenment. So thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn. And we'll see you guys perhaps in 20 minutes. Okay? Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap.